It was a normal day on Earth, or so it seemed. People went about their routines, working, studying, living, unaware that their entire world was about to change in a way no one could have predicted. But in the depths of space, far beyond the reach of human eyes, the Galactic Council, the most powerful alliance of alien species ever assembled, was about to make a decision that would alter the fate of humanity forever. In the Council's high-tech command room, a hushed silence had fallen over the alien leaders. They had been debating for months, deciding whether or not to take action against Earth. Humanity, with its growing technological capabilities and unrelenting spirit, had caught their attention. And not in a good way. The Galactic Council, made up of species who had lived for millennia, had grown complacent. They ruled over countless systems and had never faced a challenge as fierce as the one humanity posed. Earth, a young and seemingly fragile planet, was becoming too powerful to ignore. Then, on that fateful day, they made their decision. The Council declared war. Across Earth, the first news reports started to trickle in. At first, people thought it was just another bizarre headline, something exaggerated for the sake of entertainment. But as the reports grew more urgent, the reality started to sink in. The Galactic Council was real, and they were coming to Earth. News channels broadcasted the declaration, repeating it over and over, the message sinking deeper into the hearts of all who heard it. An ancient galactic alliance has declared war on Earth, the news anchor said, her voice shaky as she read the statement. The Galactic Council has decided that humanity's rapid advancement poses a threat to the stability of the galaxy. They will begin their attack in 24 hours. The world stopped. In every corner of the planet, people watched in disbelief as the footage from the Council's message played over and over. Aliens, unknown to humans, had declared war on them. What could they possibly want with Earth? What had humanity done to provoke such an aggressive response? Leaders from every nation scrambled to make sense of the situation. Military generals convened in underground bunkers, their faces grim as they discussed their options. What could they do? Their weapons, their technology, none of it could match the power of an ancient intergalactic force like the Galactic Council. The aliens had fleets of ships that could destroy entire planets with a single strike. Earth had nothing close to that kind of power. But it wasn't just fear that gripped humanity. It was confusion. Why would they attack Earth now, of all times? Humanity had no history of violence against alien species. They had only just begun to explore the stars. Why would the Council declare war on them when they hadn't even fully made their mark on the galaxy? The shockwaves spread to every corner of the world. People were glued to their screens, watching as governments, scientists, and military leaders scrambled to respond. The world, united in its fear, now looked to its leaders for answers. And in the chaos, one question hung in the air. How would humanity respond? The clock was ticking, and Earth's defense systems, thought to be outdated and underdeveloped, began to hum to life. Scientists in secret military labs across the globe worked tirelessly to prepare for an attack that seemed impossible to fight. But despite their best efforts, there was a sense of hopelessness in the air. Humanity had never faced an enemy like this before. At the same time, a small group of scientists in a hidden facility deep within the mountains began working on something else. Dr. Sarah Miller, a leading expert in advanced physics, had been working on a secret project for years, a project that, if successful, could change everything. She had always believed that humanity's strength didn't lie in their weapons or their technology alone, but in something else, something far greater. As the Galactic Council's fleet made its way towards Earth, the world braced itself for what was to come. Earth's leaders were preparing to surrender, knowing they had no chance of winning such an overwhelming war. But there were whispers in the shadows of a weapon that could turn the tide of battle. But no one had expected what would happen next. The Council's fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, their ships hovering over the planet, massive and imposing. The Earth stood beneath them, a fragile and defenseless speck in the vastness of space. Humanity waited, holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. And then, just as the world seemed to accept its fate, a sudden signal pierced the silence. The message came from Earth, a message that would leave the Galactic Council stunned. It was a warning, but not the kind they expected. It wasn't a plea for mercy or a demand for peace. It was a challenge. Dr. Sarah Miller's project, which had been kept secret for years, was finally activated. The world held its breath as an energy surge rippled out from Earth, shaking the very foundations of the Galactic Council's ships. The Council, too advanced, too powerful, and too arrogant, had never expected such a move from humanity. For the first time in their history, the Galactic Council was faced with an opponent they hadn't anticipated. Earth had just fired the first shot, and the war was no longer one-sided. Humanity was ready. The Council had no idea what they had unleashed. The Galactic Council was caught off guard. For centuries, they had watched the galaxy bend to their will. And now, in the blink of an eye, a small, seemingly insignificant planet had fired a shot across their bow. They weren't prepared for this. How could they be? Humanity, in their eyes, had always been a young and primitive species, no match for the power of the galaxy's most ancient and dominant civilizations. But Earth had just proven them wrong. In the vast control room aboard the flagship of the Council's fleet, alien leaders exchanged confused glances. A deep rumble echoed through the ship as the energy surge from Earth's unknown weapon struck their defenses. It wasn't a direct hit, but the shockwave alone was enough to rattle the mighty Council forces. The ship shook violently, as if the very fabric of space had been stretched and twisted by the power of Earth's unexpected strike. "This is impossible," one of the alien commanders muttered, his multiple eyes wide with disbelief. "How did they?" "We've never seen anything like this," another responded, equally stunned. "Their technology shouldn't be capable of this kind of energy manipulation. It's as if they're tapping into a force we've never encountered before." Back on Earth, the response was far from panic. Instead, there was a quiet confidence that had spread across the planet in the wake of the unexpected attack. The message was clear. Humanity was not going down without a fight. People who had once feared the worst now felt a surge of hope. Earth had struck first, and the Galactic Council was no longer the only one with power in this battle. Dr. Sarah Miller's weapon, the one that had caught the Council by surprise, was only the beginning. In secret facilities across the world, teams of scientists, engineers, and military strategists had been working tirelessly for months, preparing for the unimaginable. No one had expected the Galactic Council to attack so soon, but humanity was ready, or at least they had tried to be. As the Council regrouped, Earth's global leaders moved quickly to take advantage of the moment. The world's military forces, once divided and uncoordinated, now worked in unison. The United Nations issued a global rallying cry for all nations to stand together, setting aside their differences in the face of a common enemy. There was no room for division when the future of the planet was at stake. Humanity's response was swift and decisive. Earth's space fleets, though outmatched in size and technology, now stood ready to defend their home. They weren't prepared to face the full might of the Galactic Council, but they knew one thing. Their survival depended on using their greatest strength, their creativity. General Marcus Reynolds, the commander of Earth's newly formed United Space Defense Force, stood at the helm of one of the fleet's flagship ships, staring out into the darkness of space. His face was grim, but his eyes burned with determination. "We may not have the numbers or the firepower, but we have something they don't," he said to his team. "We have the will to fight. We have the will to win." Reynolds wasn't just speaking to his team. His words were being broadcast across the planet. A call to arms for every human, whether they were on Earth or scattered across the stars. It didn't matter if they were civilians, scientists, or soldiers. They all had a role to play, and humanity responded in droves. People from every corner of the world volunteered for the defense effort. Engineers worked overtime to refine Earth's space-based weapons. pushing the boundaries of human technology. Civilians turned their attention to crafting advanced weaponry and resources to support the war effort. Earth was quickly becoming a united force, and the Galactic Council had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and innovate. As Earth's fleets began to take shape, the Galactic Council's ships, still shaken by the unexpected strike, made their move. Their massive warships advanced toward Earth, their engines thrumming with the power to destroy entire cities. The threat was undeniable, and humanity's only hope now lay in the creativity of their scientists and the resilience of their people. The first battle took place in the vast reaches of space. It was nothing like the Galactic Council had ever experienced before. Earth's ships, far smaller and less advanced than the Council's, moved with surprising agility, utilizing unconventional tactics that caught the Council forces off guard. Instead of facing direct confrontation, the humans used the terrain of space to their advantage. Asteroids, debris fields, and even space dust became their weapons. They adapted quickly, finding new ways to use their surroundings and their limited resources in the most unpredictable ways. The Galactic Council's ships were technologically superior, but they were not ready for a battle fought with such raw, unorthodox ingenuity. Earth's response wasn't just about power, it was about outsmarting the enemy at every turn. Humanity had learned the hard way that when facing overwhelming odds, the best chance of survival lay in using creativity as their weapon. As the battle continued, it became clear this wasn't going to be an easy victory for the Galactic Council. Earth had found its fighting spirit, and it was stronger than anyone could have imagined. The world watched in awe as humanity's ships danced around the massive warships of the Council, launching surprise attacks and evading counterstrikes with unpredictable tactics. Back on Earth, people held their breath as the battle played out in real time on their screens. There was still so much uncertainty. No one knew if they could truly defeat such a powerful force. But for the first time, Earth had a fighting chance, and that alone was enough to ignite a flame of hope across the globe. The Council, meanwhile, was beginning to realize something important. They had underestimated humanity, and this war was far from over. The tension in space was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Galactic Council had never faced anything like this before. Their advanced fleets, the pride of their empire, were beginning to falter against an enemy they once thought helpless. Earth's response to their declaration of war had been more than they could handle. Despite being outclassed in terms of firepower and technology, humanity's creativity and unpredictability were beginning to make a real difference. General Marcus Reynolds stood in the command center of the Earth's flagship, staring at the star-filled void through the massive windows. His face was calm, but inside, a storm raged. They had survived the first wave of attacks, but the Council was relentless. The galactic fleet was vast, and its ships seemed to be everywhere. Still, General Reynolds couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Humanity had survived against all odds. Once. Could they do it again? "We've hit them hard, sir," said Captain Emily Hayes, standing beside him. She was a tactical officer and one of the sharpest minds in Earth's military. "The Council's ships are taking more damage than expected. We've managed to cripple a few of their destroyers, and their command ships are showing signs of stress. But it won't last long. They'll retaliate." Reynolds nodded grimly. He knew their window of opportunity was closing. Every minute that passed, the Council learned more about Earth's tactics. The battle was far from over. "We need to keep the pressure on them. We've got one shot at this." Meanwhile, back on Earth, the news was spreading fast. People across the globe were glued to their screens, watching the conflict unfold in real time. The world had united in a way no one had thought possible. Governments had put aside their differences, focusing entirely on the fight to protect humanity's future. Every country, every citizen, every resource was being funneled into the war effort. In secret laboratories and military facilities around the world, humanity's finest minds were working around the clock. New weapons were being designed, new tactics were being created, and new alliances were forming. One of the key strategies was to use Earth's own natural environment to their advantage. Scientists were experimenting with gravitational anomalies and harnessing the power of Earth's magnetic field. These were concepts the Council had never encountered before. But there was one secret weapon that Earth had that no one else could replicate: their unyielding will to survive. Back in space, Earth's fleet was taking things up a notch. As the Council's ships closed in, humanity's ships retreated, luring the enemy into a trap. It was a risky maneuver, one that could backfire at any moment, but General Reynolds had a plan. "Activate the gravitational disruptors," Reynolds ordered, his voice steady. "We need to shake them up." The technicians quickly moved to their stations, and a deep hum filled the flagship's command room. The disruptors, still experimental, had never been tested in a real battle. But this was no time for hesitation. Suddenly, the battlefield around the Council's fleet shifted. A ripple ran through space as the gravitational field surrounding Earth's fleet distorted, throwing off the enemy's calculations. The Council's ships, designed to operate in perfect balance with the universe's laws, struggled to adjust. Some of the larger warships spun out of control, their advanced navigational systems failing to compensate for the sudden changes. "What the hell is happening?" one of the Council's officers screamed. Their ships were swerving wildly, unable to maintain their formations. "This is impossible," another shouted. "Their gravitational technology. How are they doing this?" The chaos was short-lived, but it was enough. In the confusion, Earth's ships launched a devastating counterattack. Guided by their cunning and using every tool at their disposal, the smaller human vessels struck with precision, targeting the weak spots in the Council's fleet. Earth's ships moved like predators, striking with quick, calculated blows and retreating before the Council could retaliate. For the first time in the battle, the Galactic Council was on the defensive. Their flagship, the largest and most powerful of their ships, was now taking direct fire from Earth's space fleet. The damage was significant. Its shields were failing, and its weapons systems were malfunctioning. The Council's once unshakable confidence was beginning to crumble. General Reynolds watched the battle unfold from his flagship. The tide was turning, but he knew they couldn't afford to relax. They had to press forward, even if it meant risking everything. The enemy was powerful, but they were vulnerable. The Galactic Council had been too sure of their superiority, too confident in their technology. And now, humanity had turned the tables. "Prepare for the next phase," Reynolds said quietly, his eyes focused on the screen. "We don't stop until they're retreating." On Earth, the world watched in awe. The unexpected had happened. Humanity, the so-called underdeveloped species, was now fighting toe-to-toe with the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever known. And they were winning. But despite the victories, General Reynolds knew the true battle was far from over. The Galactic Council would not give up so easily. There was more to come, more dangers to face, and more challenges ahead. But humanity had proven something that day. They were not to be underestimated. They had the strength, the will, and the ingenuity to stand up to the galaxy's mightiest forces, and they were just getting started. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity. For years, the mighty empire had dismissed Earth as a mere backwater planet, unworthy of their attention. Now, they were learning the hard way. Earth's resilience, ingenuity, and unexpected tactics were beginning to crack the once unshakable foundation of the Council's power. And they didn't know what was coming next. The situation in space had taken a dramatic turn. The first phase of Earth's counterattack had been a success. The Council's forces were in disarray, and humanity's fleet had made significant gains. But there was no time to celebrate. The Galactic Council wasn't going to back down quietly. In the command room of Earth's flagship, General Marcus Reynolds stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the holographic displays that showed the battlefield. His face was hard, his expression focused. He had no illusions about the battle ahead. They had won a few skirmishes, but the real fight was just beginning. "Status report," Reynolds said, his voice calm but firm. Captain Emily Hayes, standing nearby, quickly scanned the readouts. "The Council's fleet is regrouping. They've activated reinforcements from nearby sectors. They're preparing for a larger, coordinated assault." Reynolds nodded grimly. He knew that the next phase of the war would be the toughest yet. The Galactic Council had vast resources, and their ships were some of the most advanced in the galaxy. But humanity had already proven that they could hit hard and fast, and they had a few tricks left up their sleeves. "We need to keep the pressure on them," Reynolds said. "If we give them time to recover, they'll wipe us out." Hayes hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "General, I think we need to do something more daring. The Council's ships are powerful, but they rely on their size and firepower. If we hit them where they least expect it, we might have a shot at taking down some of their bigger ships." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "We've been testing new cloaking technology," Hayes said, pointing to a screen that displayed a schematic of a sleek, modified Earth warship. "It's still experimental, but it's our best chance to get inside their defenses without being detected. We can send a small fleet to infiltrate their formation and launch a surprise attack." Reynolds thought for a moment. It was a bold plan, but Earth had no choice. The Council was too strong, and they couldn't afford to play it safe. "Do it," he said. The fleet of cloaked ships was prepared. They were small, stealthy, and quick, designed for infiltration rather than direct confrontation. The ships used advanced cloaking devices that allowed them to become nearly invisible, rendering them undetectable by enemy sensors. They could get close to the Council's flagship without being seen, allowing them to strike before the enemy had a chance to react. As the cloaked ships moved silently through the darkness of space, the tension was palpable. The fleet was on the move, heading directly into the heart of the Council's territory. Their mission was simple: destroy the Council's command ships and disrupt their ability to coordinate the battle. Back on Earth, the world was glued to the news, following every update with bated breath. Humanity had already shown that they could fight, but this new tactic had the potential to change everything. If Earth could take down the Council's command ships, it would be a huge blow to their operations, potentially shifting the balance of power in humanity's favor. The cloaked ships crept closer, their sensors barely picking up the massive, looming shadow of the Council's flagship. The Earth fleet was within striking distance. General Reynolds was watching the action unfold from the command center, his eyes narrowed with focus. "Steady," he muttered under his breath. The cloaked ships closed in on the target. The Council's flagship was surrounded by its smaller escort ships, powerful and well-armed. But they had no idea that the human fleet was almost on top of them. The cloaking technology had worked as expected. The Earth ships remained hidden, undetected by the Council's sensors. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. Then it was time. "Now," Reynolds barked. The cloaked ships decloaked, revealing themselves in a flash of light. The Council ships reacted instantly, but it was too late. The Earth ships fired their weapons with deadly precision, launching missiles and energy blasts directly at the command ship. The first strike hit its shields, sending a shockwave through the Council's flagship. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it sent the crew into a panic. The Council's ships scrambled to respond, but Earth's fleet was already on the move. The cloaked ships, now visible and engaged, struck again and again, targeting weak points in the Council's defenses. The battle was intense, with explosions rocking the vast space around them. The Council's flagship shook under the force of the attacks, its systems starting to fail. The Earth ships were relentless, pushing the advantage they had gained. But just as the Earth fleet thought they had the upper hand, something unexpected happened. A new wave of reinforcements arrived from the Council. These ships were even larger, heavily armed, and ready for battle. The Council wasn't about to let their flagship fall without a fight. The situation had turned into a chaotic frenzy. Earth's ships, though smaller and faster, were now outnumbered and outgunned. The battle had become a desperate struggle. The cloaked ships, having completed their mission, now found themselves in a fierce fight for survival. General Reynolds watched the battle unfold with a mixture of hope and dread. The cloaked ships had done their job, but the real challenge was still ahead. Earth had gained ground, but the Council was not going to back down. The counterattack had begun, and humanity's response was only getting stronger. But would it be enough? The battle raged on in the cold void of space. Humanity's bold move had shaken the Galactic Council, but the larger, more powerful forces of the Empire were now closing in. The Council had taken heavy losses, but they were far from defeated. The humans had made a dent in their defenses, but the cost of their success was becoming apparent. General Marcus Reynolds stood in the heart of Earth's command center, his eyes fixed on the battle unfolding outside the space station's windows. His expression was tense, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. He had led humanity into the fight, but now, with the Council's reinforcements arriving in full force, the stakes had never been higher. "We can't keep this up forever," Captain Emily Hayes said, breaking the silence. She was watching the same holographic readouts as Reynolds, her voice filled with concern. "The Council has more firepower, more ships. We're outnumbered." Reynolds turned to face her. "I know, Captain, but we've already proven that we can fight them. We have to hold our ground." As the words left his mouth, an alert blared across the command center. The flashing red lights seemed to punctuate the gravity of the situation. The Council's fleet was closing in, and this time they weren't alone. The reinforcements had arrived, and they were not what the humans had expected. "What is that?" Hayes asked, pointing at the new ships entering the battlefield. "They're huge," Reynolds muttered, his eyes narrowing, "and heavily armed." The new ships were unlike anything the humans had encountered before. Massive warships, their black hulls almost blending into the dark of space, were accompanied by smaller, agile cruisers. They moved with precision, as though every ship in the fleet was part of a larger, well-oiled machine. These ships were the Council's last resort, their final answer to the humans' unexpected attack. "Captain, what's our status?" Reynolds asked, his voice steady but urgent. "We've lost contact with the outer fleet," Hayes replied, her hands flying over the control panels. "The enemy is pushing hard. We'll need reinforcements if we want to hold them off." The Earth fleet had done its best to resist, but the Council was relentless. The new wave of ships launched an all-out assault, and their sheer size and firepower overwhelmed the human fleet. Missiles streaked across the stars, exploding with terrifying force. The once confident humans now found themselves struggling to maintain their positions. One of Earth's ships, the Pride of Earth, took a direct hit. The blast rocked the vessel, sending shockwaves through the ship. The crew was thrown to the ground as alarms rang out across the deck. "Damage report," Reynolds shouted, as he was thrown momentarily off balance by the force of the impact. "We've lost power to the outer shields. They're about to breach the hull." The voice of the chief engineer came through the comms, strained and frantic. Reynolds clenched his fists, his jaw tight. They were losing. The Galactic Council's might was proving too much, and the human fleet was beginning to buckle under the pressure. "Get those shields back online, now," Reynolds barked. "We can't afford to lose the Pride of Earth. Not now." Captain Hayes stepped forward, her expression serious. "General, we need a new strategy. We can't keep fighting them head-on like this. Their reinforcements are too powerful. We need to find a weakness, something they haven't accounted for." Reynolds nodded grimly. He had hoped the humans could hold their ground a little longer, but he knew she was right. The Council's new ships were too much to face directly. It was time to think differently. "Can we use the cloaking ships again?" Reynolds asked. "The last time they caught the enemy off guard." Hayes hesitated. "It's risky, General. We lost most of our cloaked ships in the first strike, and we don't have many left." "Do it," Reynolds ordered. "We're not out of this yet." Hayes gave a sharp nod and moved to the console, quickly issuing orders to the remaining cloaked ships. They had one shot at this. If they failed, Earth's fleet would be finished. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, the Council was tightening its grip. The human ships were struggling to survive, each move a desperate attempt to keep from being overrun. The large Council warships moved with precision, their weapons tearing through the smaller Earth ships. The humans had given it their all, but it wasn't enough to hold back the Council's power for much longer. In the heart of the enemy's flagship, Supreme Admiral Xorath watched the chaos unfold on the large screens before him. His face was unreadable, his alien eyes cold and calculating. "They fight well," Xorath muttered to his officers, "but they're only delaying the inevitable." A subordinate nodded. "Their ships are weaker. We will crush them." Xorath smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, let's end this." As he spoke, the Earth's fleet, battered and bruised, was still holding on, refusing to give in. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity's defiance was unwavering. Back on Earth, the people were watching the battle unfold through their screens, holding their breath with every new report. Hope was fading, but they couldn't stop watching. They couldn't stop hoping. The Galactic Council had struck back, and humanity was on the edge of defeat. But as long as there was a chance, General Reynolds and his crew would fight. Earth had no intention of giving up. Not now, not ever. The situation had grown dire. Earth's fleet was battered, and the Galactic Council's overwhelming forces continued to push them back. General Marcus Reynolds could feel the weight of defeat closing in on them, yet he refused to accept it. Not after everything they had already been through. Not after humanity had come this far. Inside the Earth Command Center, the air was thick with tension. Every officer, every soldier was focused, knowing they were facing what could be their final moments. "We can't hold out much longer, General," Captain Emily Hayes said, her voice strained but determined. "Their forces are just too strong. Our ships are scattered, and we have nothing left to throw at them." Reynolds stared at the holographic map of the battlefield, his mind racing. The humans had put up an incredible fight, but they were being overrun. Their ships were scattered and disorganized, and the Council's warships, massive and powerful, moved in for the final blow. Yet there was still a glimmer of hope, a small chance. He turned to Captain Hayes, his voice firm. "We still have one last card to play." The room fell silent. The staff waited for the general's next move. "What do you mean, sir?" Hayes asked. Reynolds took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the map of the Council's forces. "We have one final weapon, the Aegis Protocol. It's a secret project we've been working on for years, a weapon that could turn the tide in our favor. If we can activate it, we might just have a chance." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "The Aegis Protocol. But that's never been tested. It's still in development. We don't even know if it will work." "I don't care," Reynolds snapped, his voice tinged with urgency. "We've got nothing left. If we don't try, we lose everything. Send the order to all remaining fleets. Prepare to activate the Aegis Protocol." As Hayes moved to carry out the order, Reynolds' mind wandered to the day when the Aegis Protocol had first been introduced to him. It was a bold idea, one that had been met with skepticism by many within Earth's military leadership. It was risky, untested, and for all they knew, it could be catastrophic. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Meanwhile, the Council continued to tighten its grip on Earth's fleet. The enormous warships moved with precision, their weapons devastating everything in their path. A few human ships still held their ground, but it was clear they were just buying time. Time for what? No one knew. Back on Earth, civilians watched in disbelief as the battle raged on. The news broadcasts were filled with somber reports, families saying their goodbyes, soldiers preparing for their last mission. There was a heaviness in the air, as if the entire world had accepted that this might be the end. But Reynolds refused to accept that. Humanity had faced impossible odds before and had always found a way to survive. It was their greatest strength, their unyielding will to fight, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. "We're running out of time," Hayes said, re-entering the command center. "The Council's forces are advancing. They'll be within striking distance in 10 minutes. Reynolds nodded, his face hardening with resolve. "Then we have 10 minutes to turn this around. Prepare the Aegis Protocol." In the heart of space, the remaining Earth ships began to position themselves around the central flagship. The Aegis Protocol was humanity's last-ditch effort, and they were going to use it, no matter the cost. The human fleet's remaining warships began to line up in a formation, their weapons powered up, shields raised. The Council, sensing that something was about to happen, began to close in. Their warships loomed large in the distance, like a storm about to crash onto the shore. "General, the Aegis Protocol is ready," Hayes reported, her voice tight with anticipation. Reynolds stood tall. "Now or never." With a single command, the activation sequence began. The human fleet's ships began to glow with an eerie, powerful light. It was the culmination of years of work, and now it was humanity's only hope. As the energy from the Aegis Protocol surged through the fleet, something incredible happened. The ship's weapon systems began to power up at an unprecedented level. Shields became nearly impenetrable. And for the first time in the battle, the humans had the upper hand. The Council's fleet, though larger and more powerful, wasn't ready for this. As the first wave of attacks from humanity's newly empowered fleet hit, the Council's ships began to falter. Their shields, once considered invincible, began to crack under the pressure. Reynolds couldn't believe his eyes. The Aegis Protocol was working. Against all odds, humanity was fighting back. "Target their flagships," Reynolds commanded. "Focus all fire on the Council's command ship." The human fleet responded with precision. The energy from the Aegis Protocol seemed to amplify their weapons, turning the tide of the battle in an instant. The first shot fired from the human fleet struck the flagship of the Council, the massive ship rocking with the force of the blast. For the first time in the entire conflict, the Council was on the defensive. As the battle raged on, Reynolds felt a flicker of hope. Humanity wasn't done yet. They still had the will to fight. But the Council wasn't about to go down without a fight. The war had reached its climax. The once mighty Galactic Council was reeling from humanity's sudden surge in power. General Marcus Reynolds stood in the command center, eyes fixed on the chaotic battlefield unfolding before him. He knew this was the moment of truth, the final confrontation that would decide the fate of Earth, and possibly the entire galaxy. The Council's fleet, though still numerous and powerful, was no longer the unstoppable force it once was. Their flagships were damaged, their command ships under attack. It was clear that humanity's unexpected weapon, the Aegis Protocol, had given them the upper hand. But they weren't out of danger yet. The Council's retaliation would come with full force. "General, their flagship is still holding strong," Captain Hayes reported. "But their fleet is starting to break apart. We can finish this, but we need to focus on the command ship." Reynolds nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was humanity's last chance. If they could destroy the Council's command ship, it would throw their entire fleet into disarray, and the war would be won. But it wasn't going to be easy. The Council's forces had regrouped, and their remaining ships moved in tight formation around their flagship, determined to protect it at all costs. Reynolds knew they would not back down easily. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, but now they understood the cost of that mistake. "Prepare all remaining ships for a final assault," Reynolds ordered, his voice steady despite the tension. "We hit them with everything we've got." His command rang out across the fleet, and the remaining human ships moved into position, their weapons charged and shields raised. The energy from the Aegis Protocol still coursed through the fleet, giving them a fighting chance. But time was running out. The Council's fleet had regrouped and was ready for one last push. "General, we've got incoming," Captain Hayes shouted, her voice urgent. "They're launching a counteroffensive." Reynolds braced himself as enemy ships surged forward, their weapons firing relentlessly. The sky above Earth was filled with flashes of light as ships clashed in a deadly dance. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space, sending shockwaves through the human fleet. The once proud Council's ships were now fighting to protect what little they had left. "Don't let up. Push forward," Reynolds commanded, his fists clenched. "We have to end this now." The final assault had begun. Humanity's ships moved with a new sense of purpose, every officer and soldier on edge, knowing that their survival depended on this one battle. The stakes were higher than ever. As the human fleet closed in on the Council's flagship, the last line of defense crumbled. Their shields, once impenetrable, faltered under the relentless assault. One by one, their ships fell, unable to withstand the concentrated fire from humanity's newly empowered fleet. The Aegis Protocol had worked. It had given humanity a fighting chance when all seemed lost. Reynolds watched as the Council's flagship loomed large before him. This was the heart of their empire, the symbol of their dominance over the galaxy. It had to be destroyed. He clenched his jaw, determined to finish what they had started. "We're almost there," Hayes said, her voice filled with hope. "Target their central core. One final shot, and we can end this." Reynolds didn't hesitate. "Do it." The human fleet focused all their firepower on the Council's flagship. Energy blasts tore through the enemy ship's defenses, causing massive explosions to ripple through its hull. The flagship shook violently as it tried to fight back, but it was no use. The Council's forces were no longer able to protect it. Then, with a final, thunderous explosion, the flagship of the Galactic Council erupted in a burst of fiery destruction. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield, and for a brief moment, everything went silent. Reynolds' heart raced as he watched the enormous ship crumble, the lights of its central core fading into darkness. The Council's power was broken. The war was over. Humanity had won. Cheers erupted throughout the human fleet. Officers and soldiers celebrated, their voices filling the command center. For a moment, there was pure relief. They had done the impossible. They had fought back against an overwhelming enemy and emerged victorious. But Reynolds knew the cost had been high. Many lives had been lost, both in space and on Earth. The battle had been brutal, and the scars of war would last for generations. "We did it," Captain Hayes said, her voice filled with awe. Reynolds nodded, but his expression remained somber. "We've won the battle. But the war isn't over. We'll rebuild. We always do." As the human fleet celebrated their victory, Earth's leaders were already preparing for what came next. The Council's defeat was a monumental moment in history, but it was just the beginning. Humanity had proven that they were not to be underestimated. They had shown the galaxy their strength, their resilience, and their unyielding will to fight. And as Reynolds gazed out at the vast expanse of space, he knew one thing for certain: humanity had